Welcome. I'm David Castro, board member of the Alliance of Leadership Fellows. Today, the Alliance is excited to continue a series of national conversations engaging leaders at the frontiers of social justice. Our conversation today is about the climate crisis, which now threatens not only human communities around the world, but also the ecosystems that support life on Earth. Our series is called Talk That Walks. Our program convenes frontline leaders at the critical place where thought becomes change. The leaders in today's dialogue inhabit the transition point where experience and insight take flight as impactful action. We want to thank the Americana Foundation for supporting today's conversation. To learn more about the vision and mission of the Alliance, visit us on the web at allianceofleadershipfellows.org. I'm passing the baton now to Daniel Katz. Daniel is a leading global environmental activist. He's the founder of the renowned Rainforest Alliance and also serves as the lead environmental advisor to the Overbrook Foundation. He's also a Kellogg Foundation National Leadership Fellow. Daniel will be your guide for the rest of this event.
Thanks, David. Nice to see you all. And Esther and Shantell, thank you so much for being here right now. We are going to talk about the very small topic of the climate crisis. We should be able to solve this problem in a very short while. So to get started, I was wondering if both of you could tell us where you are and the work that you're doing and the organization that you're working for in a climate context, please, if that's okay. And let me go first, just to set the stage. As David mentioned, I started and I'm still the board chair for the Rainforest Alliance. We're an international organization that works in around 80 countries around the world. We work with over 4 million farmers on an annual basis. These are typically smallholder farmers. We help them with agricultural practices. We also work with 5,000 companies to get them to better understand their unique role in sustainability and the climate crisis and how they can better support farmers. And we also work with consumers all around the world, trying to get them on the sustainability journey. I've been doing this work for a long time now. I started the Rainforest Alliance in 1987 when I was 24 years old. Don't do the math. And in that period of time, there's been a lot of change. So many more people are aware of these issues, and yet the problems are still very, very large. So with that, Esther, do you want to go first and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go to Shantell, and then we'll start it up.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. It's so hard to not do the math when you say don't do the math, but I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Esther, and I am based out of Brooklyn, New York today. And the hat that I'm wearing today is I am a climate policy research fellow at the Aspen Institute, where I'm looking at the offshore wind industry and trying to figure out what are some areas within the ecosystem where we could really think about equity and justice and prioritize frontline communities within this emerging new space. So it is very exciting to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Shantell?
Yeah, I'm also really excited to be here. So my name is Shantell Bingham. I currently make my home in Atlanta, Georgia, but I'm originally from North Carolina. Always have to give gratitude to the folks that got me here. I'm the great-granddaughter of tobacco sharecroppers, Black farmers, labor workers on the railroad, and domestic workers, and take a great pride in all the folks that kind of made me who I am today and my family legacy. I work for the Climate Justice Alliance, which is a national organization of about 89 member orgs now. We represent and are run by what we call frontline base building, our power communities. So these are communities on the front lines of the climate crisis. They're on the front lines, the fence lines of polluting industry. And yeah, it's an honor to be on this panel with you all today, and wearing my hat as the organizing director at CJA.
That's great. You both have awesome backgrounds and look forward to learning more. In 1989, and I think you were maybe born. In 1989, I was in just a couple years into starting the Rainforest Alliance, and I went to Washington, D.C. for meetings on conserving biodiversity, and was invited to a slideshow in the basement of a Senate building that a young senator from Tennessee was giving. And that was Al Gore in the early days of talking about the climate problem. And I remember walking out of that room going, wow, that climate problem, that's really big, but I'm trying to save biodiversity. I can't do both. And it took a number of years to recognize the interconnectedness between biodiversity and the climate crisis. From then, the Rainforest Alliance got more involved in climate. It's been a part of it. How did you both get involved in the climate crisis? And it must have changed from some other trajectory you were on as a young person to this. So what happened? Shantell, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I got my start actually in the food justice movement. So before I'm actually a recent transplant to Atlanta, Georgia. But before here, I lived in Charlottesville, Virginia for a number of years, and got really close to many communities that were just trying to grow food for themselves. Many of these communities were Black and brown communities living in public and subsidized housing. They don't have the rights to their land. They didn't even have rights to use the outside water spigot. And I'm being quite honest, to water their cars. I mean, not water their cars, but wash their cars, let alone water a garden. And I started an organization called Growing for Change as a Dalai Lama Fellow. And that was back in 2015. And then remained in Charlottesville, Virginia for a while. Got involved with the food justice movement, food sovereignty movement there. Led a coalition called the Food Justice Network of Charlottesville. It was part of the Cultivate Charlottesville. And it was really intrinsic for me, the connection between our food, our environment, environmental racism, access to land that is good and healthy, and soil that is healthy to grow in. Those that don't have that same access, that might be growing in soil that was the site of a brownfield. And so a lot of that work, when it came time to uproot myself due to some life changes, really, really paved my way to being introduced to the climate justice movement. So I come to this work as a grassroots local organizer, really believing that all the change that we want to see really happens at the municipality level, because that's where I enacted change. It happens at the rural local level with these small board of supervisors and things like that. And so for me, the Climate Justice Alliance was essentially the only national organization I could work for, because our organizing model is about translocal community power, and was able to get in through the door because of the way that I was oriented in a lot of the work that I led locally with communities. And since then, I've been heightenedly turned into the climate justice movement. It's always been undeniable, especially if you're someone who's an urban farmer. You're seeing your crops, face flooding, and you're seeing extreme droughts. You're seeing a lot of these different environmental changes that, if you're trying to grow food, it becomes, imperative, especially for folks that can't afford food to put on their tables, at least fresh, nutritious food to put on their tables. So a lot of the work was already there and a part of a lot of the things that I did locally. But I would say that was kind of my stepping stone for getting more at this national climate justice field. It really started with the food sovereignty movement for me. And I'll pass it on to Esther.
Thank you for sharing your story, Shantell. One thing that I failed to mention early on in my introduction is that I am the product of a frontline EJ community in Brooklyn, New York. And in my community, we had about 3 peaker plants, a waste transfer station, a waste treatment plant, all within a very small radius, where half of the community is low income, working class, less than about a third are living in poverty, less than half have a high school education. And that really helped to inform what it is that I cared about, right? I know that this is a community with a lot of need, but also it is a community with great strengths and great ability. And everyone that I knew growing up had a lot of, was really creative and crafty with their hands. And that made me really interested in the clean energy conversation, because when I was in those rooms, all I heard about was the technological innovations that are going to help us solve or get us out of this mess, which yes, are important, but also how we engage and bridge and talk to communities that are living the impacts firsthand about how they can be a part of the conversation was not a piece that I saw that was there. And that's what got me really interested in trying to figure out, how do we bridge that gap? How do we connect communities that have skills, maybe not packaged in the way that we think about when we are thinking about the transition, but they have the skills to do retrofits, to install solar panels, to people who are thinking about financing those projects and thinking about designing policy. And where do I really fit in that space? So that's what really got me interested. It was one, my background about where I come from, but also the opportunity that I had to be in spaces where we are constantly thinking about the opportunity. As you mentioned, David, we've come a long way since Al Gore first started talking about an inconvenient truth, and I applaud him for all that great work that he did. And now we're off to the races, right? And we're trying to figure out how we're going to be building the future that we need, which is very exciting. But we must also not forget that there are a lot of communities like the one where I come from that have so many skills already. And how are we utilizing that workforce, that skill set to build the future, a just and equitable future that we want? And this is why the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, makes me so excited, right? Because it sort of centers justice at the heart of it.
Right.
So I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm very excited about it.
We're going to get into the Inflation Reduction Act, Recovery Act, and some of the other things that you talked about. But let me ask this, both of you. You both spoke with great passion, and I wonder if the work that you're doing now, do you feel like it's a job or is it a calling?
No, it's definitely not a job. I don't know. I wake up every morning with a heightened sense of like fear and anxiety, and also of just a lot of hope because of where I work and who I work with. But, we lost so many people, and I mean that like I have lost so many people and community members, right? Through the pandemic, we've had to bury a lot of folks that didn't have access to healthcare and didn't have access to even not work their job, right? To not be exposure. They're on the front lines. They're in the grocery stores. They're working in fields, picking our crops and just doing all types of hard frontline labor. And then to have that also on top of increased wildfires, increased hurricanes. In Texas, there was, the winter storm that really knocked out power for so many folks. And to continue to have all of these intense threats, and to see like your folks that are your friends and family, you know, kind of perish, it builds this heightened sense of not only anxiety and like, yes, passion, but like it's now or never, right? And we work incredibly hard, and it's not, you know, a game to us. I feel like if you speak to Elizabethan Prairie from Uprose, right, or you know, any of the Deanna from Southwest Workers Union, like all of these folks that make up our communities in the Climate Justice Alliance, there's a lot of grieving that goes on, and so it's really hard to hold both. But we're motivated by, you know, a future for ourselves that folks are actively building. We're motivated by our community and a really deep love for our land and our planet. I mean, so many folks that I work with are environmentalists without using the word, and aren't necessarily like the face that you would see on the magazine or the grist or whatever thing you're looking at, but like they deeply care for and have a lot of indigenous cultural practices of caring for the land that we find ourselves on. And that motivates me a little bit more than the fear and the sadness and the grief of loss, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's definitely not just a job. It can't be a job.
You know, so fear, you mentioned fear, anxiety, hope, now or never, motivation. That's a lot to carry. And even clearly that doesn't sound like a job. That sounds like a calling, or, you know, you can't be any place else but here doing this kind of work. Even when, you know, the climate crisis is very difficult to solve. And in our lifetime, you know, while it's here, you know, some people would like to think, well, it's out in the future, but in fact, it's here, right? We have greenhouse gas numbers baked in to what is happening to the weather and the climate right now. So it is upon us, and it's happening faster than I think even a lot of scientists would have predicted. So it's something that we have to deal with on a daily basis. And for you and those people in those communities, it is indeed a lot to think about, a lot to fix when just daily things, like if you're a farmer, you know, you've got so many other things to worry about. It's a compound interest. So Esther, what about you? Is it a job or a calling?
Yeah, I was going to say, picking off of what Shantell was saying, I am very, very scared. And I'm very scared because, like COVID, we've seen that we might be in the same storm, but not on the same boat, right? We've lost a lot of community members. I've lost a lot of community members also. And we're living in a time where we have extreme inequity baked into our system. And it's not from today, but it is from decades of historical injustices that we have passed on through policy, right? And I think this energy, I'm scared, one, but also hopeful, because I know that the energy transition could mean something different for communities like my own. It could mean jobs. It could mean economic opportunities. It could mean healthier living environments, right? We are very hardworking people, and we deserve to live in conditions that are humane, especially because we're in one of the richest countries in the world, in the history of the world, right? So if we can't do it now with people that are very smart, whenever I look at my colleagues, I just see very passionate and smart people who care about this and want to do what's right, not only because it's right, but because it's going to help us become better as a human race. So I'm excited for it, and it is a calling. It's a calling because when I go back, when I'm at home and I'm walking through my neighborhood, I see people who work very hard, come back home and are very, very tired. And I think that it is our responsibility to make sure that if they're working, that they should be working for a better life for themselves, that they should be happy, right? And we have the ability to do that. So it's an exciting time too.
Yeah, thank you. That was really wonderful. So Esther, I want to come back and ask you in just a second about, you talked about an energy and renewable energy difference. It can mean something different for these people and for the country, if not the world. But first, I wanted to ask you both. You're both in spending time in communities. How many of the people you encounter when you're in those communities understand what the climate crisis is and feels like they're a part of it, or is it just too much? There's too many other things that are going on, and it's okay, this is just another difficult pain that I have to deal with on a daily basis? Or has it gotten to the point where it's like, so I was in Ghana about a month and a half ago, and I spent time with cocoa farmers. And for the first time ever, that I had heard, because a few years ago I was in Colombia with coffee farmers, and they're saying, we asked about the climate crisis, and they're saying, well, maybe we don't really know. But now, just a few years later, it seems like everyone is talking about the climate crisis and the impacts it's having. They would say, well, it's not necessarily predictable, but it's more extreme. It's more extreme drought. It's heavier rains. But in your communities, what are you experiencing with people? Shantell, what about?
I was like, does Esther want to go first? The answer is really easy for me, because the Climate Justice Alliance, our membership are folks that have come to our alliance and are part of our alliance because they are actively engaged in transforming their communities and preparing them, or have been preparing, have been adapting to climate change, have been on the forefront of fighting environmental racism. They have a lot of different toxic industries that are, pumping toxins, forever chemicals into their water. They can no longer fish in them, so they're fighting that. They have folks that are pumping different pollutions into their air, and kids are getting sick, so I think that, in terms of our communities, if you're talking about the way that we have different membership all throughout Appalachia, like working class white communities that have been coal miners for years, or you could be talking about folks that are on the Gulf Coast, right, where drilling and oil refineries are, Cancer Alley is. You have folks that are in the Southwest and the Midwest, where there's a lot of mining industry as well, either mining for gold. You're talking about Nevada, and you have communities fighting for water rights in the midst of extreme drought, right? And there's just this tug of war always with corporations and communities that are on the forefront of fighting that. And so just really, many of ours are, there's no question about the climate crisis, and there's also no question about what is causing it. They very much, are seeing that when their water and their air and their soil is polluted, that is also driving water table draining and extreme droughts and wildfires. So I don't necessarily, I wish I had a different answer for you, but for us, it's like the communities that have been working in these industries for a very, very long time already know what the root cause is. The things that we say a lot is that, the transition to renewables is inevitable, but justice is not. And so the things that we are fighting for are for our communities that have been on the forefront of that to be at the decision-making table on this clean energy transition and really make sure that it's just. There are a lot of things, Esther mentioned that the IRA, there was a lot of things that was incorporated in that. And then there was also a lot of things that were very, very much missing that I look forward to talking about, that were really detrimental for our communities to really have a just transition, right? And so we have so many things that we have to do. And we are definitely behind, not only in time, but in our strategies that we're currently implementing all at the same time, that our communities we're not necessarily sitting around thinking about if this is happening or not because they're living in it. We're thinking about the solutions, and we're thinking about how can we get our voices at the table so that we can pass these solutions so folks can survive. And so yeah, I'll definitely stop there because I feel like I've said a lot, and pass it over to you, Esther.
Yeah, I would say that our community is not a monolith, right? We are at different sides of the spectrum. There is, we're at different places. The view that one of the reasons why I got really interested in the offshore wind industry is because I sit on an advisory board that is going to be distributing $5 million for clean energy to develop the workforce for the offshore wind industry here in the state, in New York City. Now, this was part of a community benefit agreement that was brokered between a developer and the city of New York to bring investments to disadvantaged communities. And specifically, one disadvantaged community, which is the one that I am a part of, is going to be housing a 75-acre manufacturing and industrial an assembly plant for this offshore wind developer. And when this is big, 75 acres in our backyard, right? And when I go and talk to my elected representatives about the industry, when I talk to community board members about the industry, there's that lack of understanding. These are groups that have decided that they want to be a part of the conversation, right? That are selected to be involved in community affairs, but they do not. There is that lack of understanding of like what this industry could really mean for the community in terms of jobs, in terms of economic opportunities, and I think there is a huge disconnect on. One, the advancements, the investments that we're making at the federal level and at the state level, and what information is being trickled down to the community in terms of what this could mean in actuality. And I think that's a huge missed opportunity because we need people to, one, be aware of the jobs that are coming in so they can start preparing themselves, looking for trainings and workshops, but that's not happening because there isn't that level of understanding yet, and I think that's a big opportunity that we have. So I think there's a big spectrum of understanding of the way that we could capitalize on this transition.
Right. So you're talking about this disconnect between what's happening at a community level or happening in reality and what happens at the federal level, et cetera. There are those who would say we have to bring the greenhouse gas numbers down at any cost. And nobody will benefit if the numbers keep on rising. So how do you respond to those who would say that when they aren't regarding what happens in communities or frontline communities, or those who have been hit first and worst by the climate crisis, who want to see the numbers go back down to 1990 or 1970 levels? Can you talk about that disconnect and how you deal with that? Shantell, do you want to go, because you were talking about the solutions there's
actually something that Esther said that I really wanted to respond to, if that's okay too.
Definitely.
So when we were talking, you were talking about the disconnect, Esther, and I'm really curious, like if the community is the same one that I know of in New York that we have members of that have also been working on offshore wind. And I just had a couple questions for you because you had mentioned like the jobs that would potentially be coming into the community. And I know that one of the things that we really fought for with the IRA was a civilian climate corps that was completely cut out. And what the civilian climate corps would do was ensure that people got proper training to be able to work the jobs that you were talking about. They didn't need to go, you know, find some, how do you even find training if you don't even know what it is? And so there were some really clear legislative pieces that were left out for our communities that we really advocated extremely hard for within the IRA bill, that, you know, they know that industry is coming, and it's not actually that they don't necessarily want that. It's that we've been advocating for policies that have been left off the table, that so it leaves us unready to even fulfill the jobs that you might be claiming, and that those jobs might be filled by someone else that is not necessarily those communities. So I just wanted to highlight that. And there was something else that you had noted about offshore wind that I really wanted to get in a little bit later, because I do feel like there's a disconnect between a lot of the things that, you know, communities that I work with are asking for, community-owned solar or community projects that was also X'd out of the IRA, right? In exchange for this, you know, corporate wind and solar energy, which was also linked to, ironically, fossil fuel leasing as this quid pro quo. And so for us, we didn't see, you know, I've had conversations with folks that were in Kentucky. We just had the Kentucky floods. They were joining from a hotel. We're going to be online with a key legislator in the Senate, their staff, to talk about the IRA bill. And, you know, these coal miners are saying like, hey, we've worked in the mines. We've been trying to transition our community to community-owned solar. And this is the piece of legislation that you've cut out for us. That was like for us, so we can transition our community. So I don't think there's so much of a disconnect as there is just like a lot of different, it feels like a lot of organizations that might be bigger and more aligned are kind of what Daniel's speaking to, just like at all costs cut GHG emissions, and are completely ignoring community solutions that, yes, would also cut GHG emissions, that, yes, would also be equitable and just and close equity gaps, and kind of just closing the door on us. So it feels as though, you know, it's not that we don't understand, it's just that folks aren't necessarily listening to our solutions as things that, you know, would be right. And so we come to these tables of corporate offshore wind and feeling already at a disadvantage, you know, when you're at tables with folks that seems as though, you know, they want to highlight you as your words just not being as important as maybe an academic or a professor or a large corporation entity. And so that for me is kind of the gap that I'm seeing, more so than like there's not the knowledge gap. People definitely know, we just have different solutions that unfortunately the industry is trying to fight for.
Yeah, I agree. I think to your point, the IRA tax credits for the offshore wind industry, for offshore wind developers, could mean that projects are up to 50% off of total cost, because we are incentivizing very large-scale commercial generation in the hopes that we get to a net zero path by 2050, right? So it is our goal to drive down emissions, but at what cost, right? And how are we diversifying our energy sources so that they're more equitable and they're more just and they're bringing people into the fold But as of right now, what we have is we're incentivizing large-scale generation, right? And we are hoping that they bring in benefits for disadvantaged communities through CBA, through community benefit agreements or project labor agreements, right? But if there is no form of accountability for those community benefit agreements or those project labor agreements, then we get to the same point. We could be making some of the same mistakes as we have in the past, where we have developers and large-scale generators sort of perpetuating past harms, right? And I think that is the opportunity that we have now under the IRA, is to really provide models and ideas and lift them up through public comments or requests for information, where we could highlight some of the solutions that we have. Or that, where organizations are already, who have been thinking about these challenges, put them, add them into the scope of work.
Right. So, did you want to add something?
No, I do agree with that, and I just wanted to make the plug that our communities do. We have made a just transition principles for offshore wind, and have been following the work that you spoken to, Esther, on like regulating all of these things, because we know we have to do both. And so it just becomes a lot for us to be in on these community, outreach. We always submit comments. We have tons of guidelines that we have developed. And I'm happy to like share those things with you. It's just a matter of if people are really listening. And that's kind of where I see the allyship that's necessary between, some larger environmental organizations that have a little bit more weight and gravity, than maybe we do. And really being able to push and advocate, and without compromise. For a lot of times without compromise, to be able to adhere to these community values, because we will get at the same destination. We are all trying to get to the same destination. I think of all of our communities are also like, yes, in fossil fuel production, like, can we just stop this now and accelerate as quickly as we can? And so a lot of our solutions, a lot of our guidelines, a lot of the things that we suggest are on the exact same path. And just wanting to say that out loud too.
Right. So it is complicated, right? I mean, the climate crisis is probably the most wicked problem in our lifetime, potentially ever. We are not going to come to an agreed upon solution for everyone at one time. We went backwards during the Trump administration. I remember during the Obama administration, the second term especially, I felt like, wow, we are making progress here. We're gonna get there. And then we went one step forwards and about 5 steps backwards. We pulled out of the Paris Treaty. With the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, the United States is putting more money into the climate crisis than in any other activity or bill or legislation ever. And yet it's not perfect. As Shantell said, there are a number of things that were cut out of it. Knowing that we're not going to get to perfection, do you think that the different parties can agree on a pathway, or can we agree upon solutions that will, in fact, bring down greenhouse gas numbers and support the frontline communities? Is that possible, or do you think it's going to be a fight every step of the way?
Yeah,
Esther, go ahead.
I'm gonna let you go first.
Esther, do you want to give it a shot?
Oh, sure. I can give it a shot. I think so. If we take a step back, we've been talking a lot about the IRA, but the IRA, the reason why I'm very excited is because we are entering an exciting era. And this is the era where there is a federal type of legislation for the first time since we first started talking about climate that is commensurate of the problem that we see, and that is the IRA. Right? We have $369 billion that are going to be allocated for climate solutions. And these are climate solutions that really get us on a pathway that really invest in climate technology that will get us to net zero, right? That will mean that we can see up to 42% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And within that, we have a lot of money that is going to lower and middle income Americans for clean energy technology that has to do with the deployment of heat pumps and electric vehicles, insulation. It has money to compensate people for their time, especially when we, as Shantell mentioned, we're trying to engage community on how to best deploy some of this technology. What is the best path forward that really is inclusive and puts justice at the center of the solution? So there's money to compensate people for their time when they are going into these meetings and giving their recommendations, right? And yes, there's a lot that was left out of this bill that could have made the path easier for communities, frontline disadvantaged communities. But I think that overall, it is a good step in the direction that where we are for the first time saying that clean energy technologies are a safe bet, and that the federal government, the U.S. government, is backing up these investments with money, right? With money that then could potentially unleash other capital that is available to continue making these investments and bring down the cost of offshore wind, bring down the cost of renewables, because unlike oil, the cost of renewables is brought down the more that we invest in it, the more that we deploy it. As we've seen with solar, and the cost of the cost of generation per gigawatt hour. And it has always been a fight. I feel like getting us to do the right thing has always been a struggle, is because people who are in power do not really understand what it is to be in a community that has 3 peaker plants or a waste transfer station, right? They do not come to the table with that level of understanding, or really asking questions about, yes, if we do this, what does that mean for this disadvantaged communities? But now with greater awareness and with more people like Shantell and organizations that are at the table and really being very loud about what this could mean, I think there is a good opportunity to really debate how this money gets spent and provide a path forward that is just and equitable. And I think that the IRA is just a start to the conversation where we're starting to allocate money, but there is a good opportunity to really make it something that is fair.
That's great. Thanks, Esther. So Shantell, Esther said a lot about there are a lot of great things in the IRA, but are they great for the communities that you work for? And you talked before about those solutions, and I don't mean not to be controversial, but I often hear from the environmental justice community about false solutions, the solutions that aren't going to help. They aren't equitable. They aren't really going to. They aren't going to work for everyone. Can you talk about some of the solutions, the promising solutions that you think are out there, or that can occur now, with or without the IRA?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Daniel, and thanks for asking. I think, we didn't really speak too much about, this term climate justice and what that really means. But for me and a lot of the communities that, I work with and for and are in movement with, climate justice is more than just about focusing on the environment. It's really looking at this intersection of people and place and all of the things that make up who they are, and also understanding that climate justice in a real way was birthed out of the environmental justice movement. And for us, that is about really recognizing that it's not just anybody in America that is bearing the brunt of this crisis. It really is Black and Indigenous communities, working class white communities, people of color that are bearing the brunt of this. And, if they're not in the center of a lot of the solutions that we're trying to come up with and make, then we can't really claim for it to be just. And so, like I said before, a lot of our solutions really aren't so different. Like, we need to transition to clean, renewable energy. We know that. We want to be at the table when we talk about solar, right? As I brought this up before with the coal miner in Kentucky and them trying to get community-owned solar and transition, right? We want to be at the table when we talk about wind and all of these other types of energy that would really help our communities. I think the problem is when we talk about solutions, what we're seeing, and I'll speak from my personal eye in Georgia, is that there is so much inequity in America that, I'll drive down my street and I have, in a more upper middle class suburban area, and you see a lot of folks that have solar panels on the top of their houses. You're seeing, folks that might be renters, right? Low income renters, seeing their rent go up when their landlord gets a tax credit to winterize their house and provide solar. And the idea is that there's going to be this trickle down so that their energy bill is going to be less. But really what they're doing is slapping a couple $100s onto their rent and forcing people out, right? And so there's a lot of different intersections that in the climate justice movement we're working at, the intersection of race. We talk about the intersection of class. We talk about, what does that mean for affordable housing in this renewable energy transition? And so when we're thinking about solutions that work for us, community-owned solar isn't some little fancy idea. We're really saying that when we don't have any type of rights, when we're seeing upper class communities slap solar on, they're able to sell that back to the grid. They are moving away from us. The only solutions we have is to band together, right, as low income communities of color. And that is what we've been doing. We've been banding together to get, community owned solar. And so it does mean a lot when a bill comes out, and that's an important thing for us to advocate for, and it's missing, right? It does mean a lot when we're still drinking water that has lead in it and it's missing from the IRA, 10 million households. Like, these things are, so we're dealing with a lot of different overlapping issues. And I really do feel as though a lot of times when we talk about the climate crisis, we get so focused on GHG emissions, which, yes, are important too. And yes, there's so many things that we can do to limit that stock of GHG emissions in the atmosphere that our communities also care about. We're just saying that, hey, could you please do these solutions in kind of this way? Yes, it's important that corporations transition to solar. That's good. But we're seeing our neighbors across the railroad tracks buy solar panels and get their own self-determined energy. They're going off grid. They're able to sell back. We are getting left extremely behind economically, and we are being pushed out of our communities. And so a lot of the solutions that we're calling for are so we can remain in place. I think that there's different solutions also around mutual aid for our communities that we don't oftentimes talk about. There's a lot more solutions around, like, how can you really train up a workforce and labor force so that they can, be the technicians to a lot of these renewable energy situations that I named before that is completely left off the table. And so I can't claim that the IRA is a climate justice bill because there's so much justice that was left out of it that essentially makes it very hard for our communities to access it and to feel like we're not getting left behind in its entirety. I will say, yes, it could be a start to, renewables in America, but, it's not a start to decreasing inequity. It's not a start to, tackle a lot of the systemic racism that we see within many of our systems that are very interconnected. If you're talking about our food, if you're talking about housing, if you're talking about energy, transportation, all of these are interconnected issues. And our community-based solutions offer interconnected solutions that just aren't being considered, to be honest.
So Shantell, do you feel like the IRA can be salvaged, or do you feel like, is it possible that you think it's going to be another situation that's going to be that won't end up being helpful?
Oh, so I don't mean to say that we stop fighting, right? Like, let us not forget that, like, what we wanted was a Green New Deal, mm-hmm. right? What we wanted was Build Back Better, right? And there was a lot of different tries. And then what we got is the IRA. And we're going to continue to try. Like, our community still need the solutions that we've been positing. I think what's more important to me now than ever is that a lot of organizations that have a little bit more political in weight and a little bit more political power maybe than the Climate Justice Alliance might have, or other, smaller organizations, frontline organizations and alliances might have, that they really are teaming up with us. God willing, the midterm elections would come out, we're all blue again, and that we'd be audacious and very, just forward with climate justice solutions while we have the majority in the House and Senate and the presidency, which I think a lot of us were really, really hoping for, because we had that like little blue wave or whatever, that we would be able to push more aggressively than what we've been doing. And I think that we always are willing to try and are always open. We just want to not stop where the
right. Clearly, none of us can stop trying. We have like zipped through our time here, and we're going to close shortly. But Shantell, do you think that in the last, at least in my experience, in the last 10 years, maybe, while things haven't gotten better entirely, that their relationships between frontline communities and big green organizations and philanthropy have gotten somewhat better, that you see some improvements on that front? Or do you feel like, are we moving in the right direction? Or are we moving in the wrong direction?
No, I don't think we're moving in the wrong direction at all. Look, 10 years ago, they probably weren't even talking, So we're definitely moving in the right direction. I do think that there's a lot more relationship building that needs to happen. And that just to be able to see each other as actually going in the same direction. Sometimes I think there's a lot of confusion between what communities really want and maybe what some big greens are asking for. And folks automatically write us off as like not trying to get to the same goal. And so I think that it's just important that we continue to be in a relationship, continue to listen, and follow the front, like really, really follow the front lead of a lot of our grassroots organizations, because I deeply believe we're going to get to the same destination. It's just whether or not we're going to be more equitable and just of a society than we are now. And if big greens and funders say that they care about equity and justice, then, we can definitely start going in that direction, and just to be able to follow more and trust us a bit more than maybe what has been what we've been trusted with in the past.
So thinking about moving in the right direction, as I said at the beginning, I've been working on environmental issues for a long time, close to 40 years, if not 40 years. awareness has gotten a lot better. Some of the solutions are coming along. I believe we have all the technology that we need to solve all of the climate problems, but we don't have the will of the people. We live in a world where there's heightened anxiety, as Shantell, you were saying early on. I have children who are so worried that they're not going to have the same kind of lives that people in the past generations have had because of climate insecurity. I'm at the point where I'm getting ready to pass the baton. I've been doing this for a long time, right? So for, as I said, several decades. So can you both imagine for a second, it's 40 years from now for you both, and things have gone right. What kind of world are you passing on to your children and grandchildren? What's worked? So what does the United States look like, and what kind of situation are we in? And if things can go right, realistically, not like, we're just going to wave the magic wands, but what do you think? 2060. Esther?
There's so many ways to answer this question, but I'm going to go very, very at the community level, very, very micro. And I would say that for communities like the one where I grew up in Brooklyn, I would love to see more focus on healthcare. I think people are sick either from overworking too much or pollution, environmental pollution that we've seen over the past few years. I would love to see access to good quality healthcare that they can go to a doctor whenever they need to. More access to parks. With me, where I grew up in, you can kick a ball and hit someone in the head because there's only one park for so many people in one area. More access to affordable housing. I think that is the challenge of our day. Every time we see homelessness, and that number is continuing to rise, and people need to be able to know that they are going to be able to afford their home in the next few months. So I would start with very basic things like access to healthcare.
So, okay. Yeah. So can you just tie that into the climate crisis, though? You're working on offshore energy and renewable resources. We're in the midst of this crisis, but in 40 years, because of your work and your colleagues' work, is the difference that there is? Well, I don't know. From a climate point of view, how do you answer that question?
Yeah, from a climate point of view, I would say that people are employed in well-paying jobs. People have good paying jobs that they can walk to from home. Right. I mentioned that we have a 45-acre manufacturing site in a low-income working-class community. There are people who live right up the street from this 75-acre manufacturing assembly plant. Ideally, they would be able to walk to the assembly part where they can do their work and then come back and have electricity that isn't eating a third of their income, right? Cheap electricity that is available whenever they need it, and do not have to rely on heavy transportation, because one of the questions that we have right now with the offshore development of the offshore wind industry is how are they going to be bringing in some of the materials that they're going to need for the assembly of these turbines? Are they going to be using water, or are they going to be using trucks that are going to be coming into these communities? So I guess those are the very basic things.
Now I'm just going to push you one more time. It's 2060. Have we solved the climate crisis?
Have we solved? Yes, we have.
Yes, we have.
Yes, we have solved the climate. In an ideal world, yes, we need to have solved the climate crisis, where we see microgrids, community microgrids, where we see offshore wind, where people are not turning on their lights whenever they want to, but have more conscious understanding that we should be using or reducing our use of energy.
So we have systemically done enough. We've changed the will of the people. We've used the technology, and things are better.
Oh my gosh, Daniel, I feel like, are you asking me to answer? Like,
yes, I am. No,
I don't know.
What do you think? I mean, I know that, we want system. You want a climate just world probably requires some systematic changes. Have we done that? By the time that you're done working, you're about to go and, go swim in the ocean for the rest of your life and say, I'm done. I've done my job. What is the world looking like?
I'm going to co-sign Esther's ideal. I mean, I will say my ideal situation is, Esther was explaining localized economies, which is tantamount important. I think COVID-19 pandemic taught us that regardless if it's some extreme weather event, or if it's, a health related issue, that our supply chains are very fragile and they can break. And I don't think that the world that we're going in which, we've already heated this planet by 1.3 degrees Celsius already. There's a lot of irreversible things that we're going to experience. And so we're going to continue to see, more droughts and more wildfires and more intense storms. And what Esther was explaining, the way that we need to adapt is to move away from being so corporate. I think if we're even talking about the food system, it's ran by almost just 4 corporations, right? Like 4 big food and ag corporations almost control the 70% of our food system. And so if we really want to survive, in what world looks like in 2060 is these localized food systems. We need space to grow our food in our own communities. Esther was talking about community-owned solar, neighborhood grids. We need that. I was just reading an article about Hurricane Ida that ripped through Florida, and the one community that had power was a small community that was on solar. And right. So I think it's really important that our grids get a little bit broken up to the neighborhood block level, and we're able to have more community engagement in running our society. I think that there's going to be a huge shift to what we like to call a regenerative economy, where, we're not just dependent on some big Tyson's chicken to grow all of our chickens for each other. I think the world I want to live in is more cooperative. It's more community centered. People are able to feed and keep their families fed, even if there is a huge storm that knocks out the power that keeps, shipments from coming in for 3 weeks or whatever the thing is. I know that there'll be more potential COVID-19, right, strains that come out that might stop our society. And so, we're already on this train, and some of what we're seeing is irreversible. So it is really up to us to kind of restructure and readapt our communities to fit. And for me, it is that localized transition that is the structure that we need to have, with a lot of community owned projects and folks being engaged more so than, us leaving it all up to big corporations to do everything for us. That just doesn't work. That's just not going to work in the world that I see anymore. there's too many factors with the climate to make that a reality. So
you both gave really wonderful answers, and I have about 100 other questions that I want to ask you both, and this is a really amazing conversation. The one thing that gives me a sense of hope is that as I age out of this world a little bit, is that you, Esther, and you, Shantell, are fighting so hard for our present and a better future. And I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your taking the time to talk to me today. And thank you for all of the great work that you're doing. And I can't wait to watch your continued successes and read about the worlds that the better world that you're both making. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Daniel. Really would have loved for you to share your opinion more too. I feel like it was all Esther and I. But it was really good to be with both of you this afternoon for me. I know it's still probably just getting to the afternoon for you, Daniel, on the West Coast, but it's been fun. We should do this again.
Yeah, you both come at it, the climate. I'm at this point where I feel like we have to almost throw everything up against the wall and see what sticks, because we're so late. And you both come at this from very different angles, but when you peel away a couple of layers of that onion, you're in exactly the same place. And what we need to have happen is we need to peel away the layers of the onion for everybody, because ultimately we all, pretty much anybody who believes in science anyway, is going to come at it and recognize that we all need to do the same kinds of work. We know we're going to have to get by with a little bit less, or we're going to have to live a little bit differently. But in fact, the solutions are there, and hopefully the will be there, so that we all march in the same direction and create a planet that's better for everyone and not just a few. Because with the climate crisis, I tell people this all the time: you can run, but you cannot hide. You can think that you're going to go to Minnesota or Vermont, that's not coastal, but the infectious diseases are going to follow you there. There's no escaping it.
Yeah, and Daniel, just to your point, I think there's so many opportunities. What makes me so excited about this space is that there's so many opportunities to really come up with solutions, because we all have very different backgrounds and different life experiences that we come from it from different angles. So I am very hopeful for the future because of that, because of we are trying to design a new, just future. And we have people that are now interested in it and are feeling the effects, as you mentioned, of the crisis, and that we need to act now. So I guess that would be my calling too to the audience, to really figure out where you fit into the climate space and try to act from there, because we need you.
Yeah, somehow we're going to have to tie those market-based solutions and the community-based solutions together, so that they work in harmony and not against each other, right? Mm. And somehow we are going to have to find a way to recognize that people want to make money, but they should not be allowed to make money off the backs of other people. That hurts where they live and how they live. We have to be, we on Sunday in New York was the New York City Marathon, and one of the most life-fulfilling things is to go out there and cheer on those people who run. And we are rooting for everyone to win together. And we're all participating. And tens of thousands of people are on the sidelines just rooting for people that they don't even know to finish and to race and go, let's go, you can do it. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but we all need to have a little bit more of that, to root for each other and to not be competitive, but to be all in it together.
Yeah. Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, I think that the competition thing is really kind of intrinsic to our society in a lot of ways. Like we maybe live in too much of a capitalist society that has gone a little bit too far. And I think, when you think about what it's going to require to really survive and make sure that everybody makes it through the climate crisis. It's really ideals of community well-being and, being to what, you've already shared a little bit, like really caring about if someone makes it to the finish line or not. And I say that as a very competitive athlete. At one point in my career, I was like top 5 in the world for the women's hurdles. So I'm very competitive and I love races. And, went to university to run and all these things and got off on the social justice track when I was there. But, I think that there's so much when you talked about market-based solutions that right now it really is not. It is really rubbing gears a lot with equity and justice. And I think we have a very, very long way to go.
Do you think that they can come together? That's what I was trying to get to. Can market-based solutions be equitable and work with justice?
I'm not sure if the way in which we've designed and think about market-based solutions can work hand in hand right now at all. I think that there's too much of a focus on the economy. There's too, and when I say the economy, I really mean like really clearly industry, the fossil fuel industry. There's a lot of different support to prop up those types of corporations surviving. And unfortunately, those are the same corporations that are in our backyards. And so there's a real tension there. I think that it's going to be incredibly hard when you're speaking with someone that really their bottom line really is making a really good return on investment in financial sense that is just not, it just is incompatible with the environment. It's always been incompatible with the environment, right? If it were compatible, we would not be in the situation. And so, I think that market-based solutions in general, like where they are right now, it's not the bullet. But, I'm always hopeful. I think folks are going to really have to redesign what they want as a profit or a dividend and really start to think more critically about it than what they do now. Right now, I don't think there's too much of it.
I think back, like, how is it that at some point in time, somebody was polluting the water or somebody else was burning something and it was going into the air and somebody else didn't say, hey, wait a minute, that's not your water. That's not your air. That's everybody's. If you're going to do that, you have to find a way that it's not going to impact us in a negative way. And it seems like we got on that road and nobody ever just stopped and said, wait a minute, we can't be on this road unless it's a road that everybody can walk on together equally and support.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard, right? I think what we need, Shantell, is we need someone like you and to work with Esther and others and to build that playbook of how we get to net zero with solutions that work for everybody. I have not seen that. And I think that's what we need. We need specific, time delineated, solution-centered playbook that works for everybody. Because we can't just say, this is not right, without saying, here's a better way. Here's how we're going to do it. And even bringing out, working in communities, I think that's great. But if you look at that around the world, there are some, if you look at China, for example, there are some provinces of China that have amazing soil and water, and some that are desert and don't have anything. So the people there, are they just penalized because of where they live? And so these community-based solutions are fantastic, but they may not work globally. Mm-hmm. So our problems are difficult. But I think that we have the technologies and we have the will, or if we have those things, we can solve these problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And community-based solutions for the US that, look very different if you're in South Sudan, which we are. Like right now, we have a group at COP, at the Conference of Parties in Egypt right now, and are moving and working with folks from Ghana. And you also like opened up about talking about the different cocoa farmers, and just to highlight that, yes, those communities also have their solutions as well, and are also very vocal about it, and are trying to do what they can to change their own environments and their own, economies, and really have a just transition to a localized regenerative economy for, where they're located as well. And so I think we get really focused on like this bullet solution that can be scaled up. And sometimes I just want to posit that our scale up is already here and it has already happened. And just to realize that when we talk about community-based solutions, like people have retrofitted communities or solutions to match their community. And it is in fact very much scaled. We just need the money, right, to implement them. And so that's where I think the rubber really needs to hit the road. Because a lot of our communities, like we said before, are low income communities. And so they just don't have the capital like a lot of others might that are in the upper class.
Right. That's the same thing. So in Ghana, one of the things we're doing, the yields are are going down because of the climate crisis. So we're at the Rainforest Alliance working with these communities and helping them plant more trees and come up with alternative incomes of raising bees, raising snails, other ways that they can use the land better and also raise more money and have a better life. And I think we need to look at that across the board. But in an industrialized world where we are using our footprint is way bigger, we have more responsibility. We have a greater responsibility in this country as a citizen of this country to do more, I believe. And the hardest part is to get those who have a lot more to either help more or live with less.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, to your last point, I would add that those conversations between big groups and smaller environmental justice groups are happening, right? Right now at COP, we have the first climate justice pavilion in the history of COP, where people are hosting those conversations and coming up with solutions that they're going to be highlighting and writing up. And I think that's what makes it so exciting, that now there is that push to do more integrative solution planning that reaches goes across the aisle to come up with solutions that benefit all of us. So I'm excited for the outcomes of those conversations to be highlighted and shared with the group.
Yeah, there are a lot more. There are so many more people who are involved in this field. There are graduates every day who are specializing in so many different areas around renewables and new technologies, and that's really exciting. And in environmental justice, you can now get I think a master's or PhD in so many different areas. So that creates hope. At the same time, we are behind the 8 ball. We're late, right? So there's no time for sitting around listening to podcasts. We all have to get to work. And
like the one we're recording right now.
That's why we're going to end this podcast right now, and we're going to all get back to work because we have to hurry up, because those greenhouse gas numbers aren't going down yet. We need to make them go down in a way that works for everyone.
On behalf of the Alliance, thank you for joining us today for this important conversation. It's our hope that sharing these ideas will open new pathways to effective action supporting the fragile world we share. Thanks also to the Americana Foundation for supporting this series. Find us on the web and get involved with our work at allianceofleadershipfellows.org.